So I wanted to share a mod that I did about 5 years ago on my 2005 F-150 Lariat Super Crew. I modified the dome lights, map lights, and I wanted to film this in the evening, but it's raining today, and I wanted to be able to show off the lights so that you could see what I was talking about. So I powered the two map lights in the back from the dome light, and I'll show you in schematic form how to do that, and then I'll show you physically how to do that. That's a very simple modification, just to install a very simple jumper wire. And then from the dome light map lights, so for a dome light my two map lights come on in the front, and that's the way Ford did it originally. So I closed the door so that the time delay relay on the battery saver relay will turn off in just a moment here, and then I'll show you the two map lights. There you go, the dome lights turned off. Now if you push on the map light comes on, so the switch is actually on the body of the light. So off of that switch, I powered two incandescent bulbs on the floor, one on each side, one near the transmission tunnel, and then one over near the cook plate on the right side, on the passenger side. And then I also ran a wire down the left side column on the driver's side, and I have two bulbs over there so that no matter where your feet are placed, you're able to see the floor if you should drop something on the floor, or just to illuminate your feet on the truck. So like I said, out in the truck, this is a really simple but just a cool modification that you can do to the dome light circuit. I'm going to show you how simple. Now these schematics might look complicated, but they're really very simple. And this is a very simple soldering job that you have to do this. And it's installing one jumper wire and running a couple wires down to under the dash. So this is the circuit I'm talking about right here. This is fuse 24, circuit number 24. It's a 15 amp fuse. It comes down through this battery saver relay, which is just a time delay relay that keeps dome lights on for a few minutes after you close the door, so that the dome lights don't go off immediately, so you got some illumination to find your keys or whatever. So this same circuit powers the vanity mirrors and the dome lights, and then the stoplight mounted cargo bed lamp, and if equipped, these exterior mirror lights. Now I've got a 2005 Lariat, like I said, it's a Super Crew, and this dome light circuit isn't drawn exactly right in this Chilton's manual. Now I bought this Chilton's manual just for these wiring diagrams that are in them, and this one doesn't work for my truck, so I've redrawn it. So it should look more like this. Now, this isn't exactly right either. I'll show you why in just a minute, but I wanted to redraw it so that you had an idea what I'm talking about. Now here's the interior map light assembly for the rear of the vehicle. What I have is I have a dome light and I have two map lights in the back because I have that Super Crew. Now I don't know if all the trucks have that, but I have three individual bulbs and I have two switches. And in the front I have two map lights. They're powered like dome lights through this circuit, and they each have their individual switch, so you can turn them on individually outside of the dome light circuit. I'm simply going to come off of this switched map circuit on each of the two map lights and run a wire down under the dash and power two bulbs, two under the driver's feet and two just above the passenger's feet. So here's my wire coming in and switch. I run one wire down the left side column or the driver's side column to two sockets that you can purchase at AutoZone or Advance Auto or Napa or any retail outlet. Provides these sockets that fit either the 168 bulb or the 192 bulbs. I chose to use the 168 bulbs. They're a little bit brighter. They pull 0.3 amps. So then I also run a wire down the right side column, the windshield column, to two bulbs that are under the passenger feet. So you might ask yourself, what am I doing to this 15 amp circuit then that's providing power to all these different circuits? So if I have a 15 amp circuit and Ford engineers oversized that by 10%, then with a 15 amp circuit, take that times 10% or 0.1, that gives me 1.5 amps to play with. Now, I know since I've been running these circuits this way for about 5 years that isn't true, that this particular circuit and these wires can handle up to 30 amps probably. So let me show you what I've done in the rear. I've added these two bulbs then to the dome light circuit. So those two 921 bulbs that are existing add about an amp, so 0.5 each. So I've added 1 amp there. And in the front, I added 4 bulbs, and those are the 168 bulbs. Those bulbs I know because I've measured them in the past are 0.3 amps each, or 1.2 amps. So 1 amp plus 1.2 amps gives me 2.2 amps. So I'm adding 2.2 amps to this 15 amp circuit. So if you are worried about adding too much load to this circuit, then the thing to do is add LED lights to the circuit. Those will add a fraction of this 0.3 amps, probably a tenth of that if you use LED lamps for these 168 bulbs. Now, if you're worried about adding any load at all to the circuit, then you could also go back and replace these incandescent lamps that came factory OEM with LED lamps, and that'll actually reduce the load on the complete circuit. So these are the items that you need to make the modification to the front dome map light assembly by adding the two sockets to each side underneath the dash. You need some way to solder the wires, so I have a soldering iron. You can use a soldering gun, a damp sponge, rosin flux, and a rosin core solder, a little bit of sandpaper, a way to strip the wires, way to seal the wires, so heat shrink tubing, and dielectric grease, or form a gasket, or either that or RTV if you want to keep the wire flexible. Some way to secure the wire. So I have wire ties, electrical tape, and of course the heat gun to shrink the heat shrink tubing, a small regular screwdriver, a 1/4 inch ratchet, 1/4 inch extension, 7mm socket, then of course the 4 sockets that you need to install the bulbs into, 4 bulbs, some way to terminate your ground wires. So I have these eye lugs, and then of course 16 gauge wire. To remove the front dome light, remove the overhead accessory item. Simply pull down on the latches on either side of the bin. Get your fingers in between the headliner and the dome light assembly and pull down. It just snaps in place. To run a wire through the headliner, all you have to do is go along this column, the support piece that's attached to the roof. There's a hole right here on the right side of where the dome light assembly attaches to the roof. Push a wire up through the headliner. You put your fingers up here near the mirror. Run this wire straight to the windshield. Snake it up through there until you can feel it. Be able to feel it. Pull it out. Run enough wire to get to your windshield column over on the right side, and then you'll be able to tuck it back up into the headliner after you've run it down your column. To remove the windshield column covers, simply pop out the protective cover inside or handle side first on both of these, and then it's 2 7mm head size bolts that are captive to remove that. Once you have the 2 bolts removed, it just simply, well, I guess one of my bolts isn't captive anymore. Simply just lift it up and negotiate it out. So once you've got that off, now it's ready to run your wire down. So we snaked it through from the windshield right here. So once you've got it long enough, you run along that column, and there's already a wiring harness here. So I electrical taped my wires that I ran to that wiring harness in several spots, and just run it down through the hole in the side of the dash along the windshield, and it'll come out down under by your glove compartment. So you can follow that wiring harness. That wiring harness goes down to the fuse box. And then once you've got it here to the glove compartment, this is where you want this side to end up, is right here. And then you can solder it into your sockets right here. So it has a brown and a black wire. Solder your wire, your positive wire, into the brown, and then run your black wire. Mine's running right here. Run it to some ground, and you can see that I'm using a common ground on this side. So I run both of my wires to ground in one spot. So I've got one socket here on the left side near the transmission tunnel, and then one over near the kick panel. To solder your wires onto the circuit board here, you can pop these 2 connectors. Simply push the tab on the left hand side of this one, pull it out, push the tab on the white one, pull it out, and you could take this to the bench and solder it, or you can see that I've got it soldered already right here. So I'm going to the inside connector that I've soldered. So again, you want to clean that up with just a little bit of sandpaper, then make sure you're using the rosin flux and then a rosin core solder So you're minimizing the amount of heat that you're putting on this copper piece on the circuit here. Do that for both sides. So right here, you see that I've soldered onto that, a wire onto that, and I've left mine exposed. I didn't add any kind of heat shrink tubing or anything because that's pushed up into plastic, up into the headliner, and there's nothing that can interfere with that. Of course, this copper is all exposed anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. Now, since we're up in here, I'm going to show you this other circuit that I've tapped into. If you look at the blue-black wire here, that goes to from the switch. It's in the center here. That's the switch for the rear window, to actuate the rear window. And that is a maintain power switch, so it stays on for approximately 20 minutes after the key is turned off. That stays on with the radio and the windows. So I wanted to use that to run a relay, so I tapped into that and ran a wire similar to the way I ran my other wires. So that's the green wire up here. I ran it down over to the right side column, over to the glove compartment is where I have a relay there. And I can show you what I did that on, and maybe on another project, and I'll link to it in the comments below. Once you've run the two wires, one down each side, each column, you're done with the overhead console. All you have to do is line up the 4 tabs. And push it into place. My overhead console is a 2-piece, so you have to line up the little tab in the front to the hole, the locator hole, and it just simply clips into place. Screw in your 2 screws. Remember, I said they were captive. One of mine isn't captive anymore. And put the 2 covers back on. Yeah, that concludes the video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please subscribe.